everyone, it's Erica. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I am married to Nick, who also makes videos for this channel, and he has somatic OCD. He's been suffering for about a year and a half now. But this video today, I wanted to speak more to the individuals who have been supporting someone with OCD for like a lot longer than that, maybe 10, 20, maybe more years. Now, I'm going to preface by saying I do not have experience with having gone through that, at least not at this point. So, a lot of this information is Rob and I spoke about it. So, Rob has helped a lot of people with OCD of many types and in many situations. And so a lot of this information is relayed from him, but I can tell you that a lot of this information is also pertinent to people in my situation who maybe haven't been dealing with it as long. It is definitely pertinent to that as well. However, in this situation where it's been going on for a really long time, there might be some unlearning or relearning or whatever you want to call it about how to support an OCD sufferer through this. So just bear that in mind. It might take some relearning or unlearning on your part, learning what not to do, what to stop doing, what to phase out, that kind of stuff. So I do have a list of stuff here that I want to cover. So if you see me looking down at my notes, that's what I'm doing. And the first thing is that there's no quick fix. And if you've been helping somebody through this for 10, 20, maybe more years, you probably know this, that there is no quick fix. It's really, it does take a lot of patience. I know that even with us, with having just dealt with it for a year and a half, there were moments where he was getting better and then he would have a bad day and I would get frustrated and I wanted him, I know that he wanted a quick fix, and that's not how it works, but I wanted a quick fix too because I was so uncomfortable and tired and my patience was not always there. I wanted a quick fix out of my own selfish intentions, but I had to, grapple with that and realize that this is not about me. This is about him, and I just had to accept the fact that there's no quick fix with this. So I know that that's not always the easiest thing to grapple with, but you're just gonna have to understand and realize that it's not gonna be an easy or quick road by any means. Second thing is not to play into the reassurance or the checking or the compulsions that they may have. So this has been going on for a long time. That's what this video is about. And more than likely, the family members, and this is where I'm talking about unlearning, the family members have probably been playing into this a little bit with regards to the compulsions or the reassurance or the checking or whatever it is that they do to bring their anxiety down. So for example, you might have gotten in the habit of telling them that everything's going to be okay. That's reassurance. Maybe if they have something like contamination OCD, you might be doing things to help them decrease their anxiety about germs or whatever the contamination that they're concerned about is. So things like that, you want to try to phase that out and not play into that quite as much because they have to learn how to sit with that anxiety and either learn that it's not the threat that they believe that it is. There's a lot of unlearning on their part too that they have to do with this. So you don't want to be playing into it because otherwise it's just going to keep the cycle going with the OCD. So try your best to identify what their reassurance, compulsions, checking behaviors are, and then not playing into it. So there's a lot of references on this channel as well. So if you're not sure how to recognize reassurance or you're not sure how to recognize their compulsions, if you're not sure how to recognize their avoidance behaviors, you probably already have an idea of what those things are. But if you're not sure, because there were some that Nick and I are still to this day figuring out that he was using as a compulsion. So there are some things that you might not realize are compulsions, but they are. So try to see if you can help recognize them and address that and not play into it. 3 is don't talk about OCD all the time. 3 and 4 are kind of closely related, but don't talk about OCD all the time. We need to. It's almost like the idea of like choking the OCD. Like we don't want to give it life and have it take over everything. We need to carry on with normal life. And by talking about OCD all day, every day, that's not really helping the case. And that leads me to number 4 is don't feel guilty or afraid to do things like take breaks or take vacations. We also need to, as supporters, our lives do need to continue as well. And by avoiding doing those things or saying, oh, well, we'll go when Nick is better, it's delaying our lives as well. And that's not fair to us either. And as well for the OCD side of things, you're teaching the OCD and that person that it's okay to avoid normal life. So you don't want to necessarily be doing that. It is important for them to continue on with life as normal. So don't play into that either. If you need to take a vacation or you were planning on taking a vacation, don't let OCD stop that. So that's number 4. Number 5 is realize that the sufferer is going to get angry at some point. Nick still does sometimes. Nick got angry a lot. But it's really important for you to stay calm and for you not to give in to the reaction that they might be looking for. So sometimes Nick, and again, he hasn't been suffering for 10 years, but this is more than likely going to happen with all OCD sufferers at some point. If Nick would start to get angry, sometimes it was because he wanted a certain reaction out of me, like reassurance. And I had to be very diligent about not giving into that. I had to be diligent about not saying that everything was going to be okay. I had to be diligent. Sometimes, if you've watched previous videos of ours, Nick would sometimes jump to, I want a divorce, and that was coming from a place of, I can't go through with my recovery. He wanted to play video games, which was an avoidance behavior for him. He wanted to basically give up and say, I'm just going to smoke and I'm going to not care about my life and I'm going to play video games for 30 hours a day and I want a divorce. So he was looking for me to reassure him basically that that was an okay thing to do, or that I was just going to leave him so that he could do those things and not have to go through his recovery. So he would get angry and then try to stimulate that reaction of, fine, I'm going to leave you, out of me. Try not to give into that. Sometimes they are looking for that specific reaction out of you. And it's important in those situations also to remind them that this process is going to have ups and downs. And those down moments are a very important thing for them to go through, because that is the most important time for them to be practicing their recovery habits. So, Nick, for a while, he couldn't, for example, and I'm going to touch on caffeine again in a second, but he couldn't be drinking caffeine because it was like clockwork. The next day, or even just later that day, everything would hit the fan and he would not be okay because he hadn't practiced enough, hit everything that he needed to do to learn how to cope with additional anxiety from the caffeine. He hadn't gone through enough practice to learn how to effectively deal with that. So he had to go through more down moments to practice that before he could start reincorporating caffeine into his normal routine. So just remind them that, it is going to have ups and downs. Remind yourself that there's going to be ups and downs. Ups and downs are necessary and they're going to happen. The most learning is going to happen in those down moments, in them learning how to cope with all of this stuff. So just remind them of that. It is probably going to be a little helpful for them to remind them too that, hey, I'm in a down moment. I need to practice the things that I have been learning. So remind them of that. Number 6, exercise and healthy lifestyle is important for everyone, not just them. It is important for you too. So make sure that you are practicing that. I did do a video on healthy lifestyle for OCD sufferers and families previously. You can definitely go reference that. But I would also recommend, to add on to that, to watch for patterns with them if you're finding that higher sugar is. I just spoke about caffeine and how caffeine would affect Nick. It increases his anxiety, and it was like clockwork. The next day or later that day, he would have a really bad day. He would not be able to tolerate it, and then we would get to some really dark moments with that. So he needed to do some practice before he reincorporated that. But I would watch for patterns. If there's certain things that they're eating, and then you notice, again, it's like clockwork, that sugar might be one of them. They get that, sugar high, and then either good or really good things or really bad things happen from that. More than likely not great. But that sugar high, the caffeine, I would just be watching for things like that. Watch for the patterns. And if you need to have a discussion with them saying, maybe we need to take this out for a little bit until things are a little bit better. If you're working with Rob, then maybe you can discuss it with Rob. But I would highly recommend to watch for those kinds of patterns. Speaking to healthy lifestyle habits, another thing would be laptops and screen time. It's probably not a great idea for them to be on a laptop or a screen or whatever, social media all day long. It can become compulsive. It can become avoidance. And they might be, if they're on forums and stuff all the time, that might become a compulsive behavior, but they might also be looking for reassurance. If they're not looking for reassurance from you, they might be looking for it from somebody else. So they might be going on to a bunch of different forums, looking to see if other people have their symptoms. Again, that's reassurance. They might be looking for that. It might be just that they're scrolling through Instagram and they're trying to find an avoidance behavior. That might be their version of Nick's video games. Nick was playing video games as an avoidance behavior, so he didn't have to think about his OCD. They might be scrolling through Instagram for the exact same reason. So you don't want to have them sitting on Instagram for 12 hours a day, trying to avoid their OCD, because that's not going to lead to recovery. And then it can also become compulsive for the exact same reason that I just said. So I would definitely try to make sure that they are, what's the word I'm looking for? Participating in reality. Again, it is important to continue with regular life. And if they're sitting on their screen all day, then that's probably not continuing with regular life. They need to make sure that if they're a child, they're going to school, they're socializing with friends. Same thing with adults. Socializing with friends and colleagues and stuff is going to be important as well. And being on your laptop or phone all day is probably going to hinder that. So I would just watch that. Number 7, I have to do a disclaimer for this. I'm a chiropractor. I do not prescribe medications. I have no say on, even if I did prescribe medications, I cannot talk to you about meds through a screen. So, medications is number 7. Medications and whether or not they get prescribed is up to the doctor that they are seeing. It is not up to me. It is not up to Rob. Please leave it up to your doctor. Your doctor is going to do, or should at least do, a thorough exam, make sure that what they're doing is right for that patient. So please leave that decision up to the doctor. If the doctor does go ahead and write a prescription, if you're a parent, it would be good for you to make sure that they are taking those medications, and that they don't run out of those medications. You want to keep consistent with what that doctor has prescribed. So that consistency is going to be really important. And sometimes, I know as a kid, I still to this day have a hard time remembering to take my vitamins. So, as a kid, you do want to make sure that they're following through with that as well. And to speak to the parent thing, this is my last point, is you're likely gonna, as a parent, and again, I'm not a parent, I can't speak to this, but I can speak to the developmental side of kids and teenagers. Their frontal lobe, which is right here, is still developing. That is what helps make them make executive decisions. It's the part of their brain that says, hey, this is a good idea, or hey, this isn't a good idea. It's still developing in them. So neurodevelopmentally, this does not fully mature until the age of 25. Now, they're probably going to be able to learn what a good decision and a bad decision is, hopefully prior to that. So, but as a kid or as a teenager, they're probably going to need a little bit more guidance than maybe my situation with Nick might need. You know, he's 31 actually, as of yesterday. He's 31 years old. He has a pretty good idea of what's good for him, what's not, and his frontal lobe has developed. He doesn't need me to guide him quite as much and teach him, you know, the things that are going to be helpful. He can come to those decisions on his own and do his own learning. So it doesn't require as much responsibility on my part, but a child more than likely will. But you do need to remember that this is still a learning process for them as well. So doing everything for them is not going to be helpful, because then they're going to become reliant on you. And as they get into their adult years, they haven't gone through that learning process of everything that they need to do for their recovery. So they're still going to be relying on you, which is not ideal, because that's not what we want. We want them to learn how to do these things on their own. So bear in mind, it is going to take a little bit more responsibility, more than likely, on the parent, but make sure that they're still going through all of that learning process. So again, I can't speak firsthand to all of this, because Nick has been suffering for only a year and a half. It hasn't been 10, 20, 30 years. But again, a lot of this is applicable to more cases than just the 10, 20, 30-year cases. So it is applicable to a lot of people. There might just be some unlearning or relearning that has to happen on the side of the family. If you have any questions about any of this, or you're feeling lost, you don't know where to look, need some advice potentially, drop it in the comments below. We are going to be more than happy to help if we can. But yeah, if you need any advice, please reach out. And I did say in my last video too, if there are any topics that anybody wants covered, it's great for us to know the things that family members and loved ones of OCD sufferers want to know. Or if they just want to hear about my experience with certain things, that would be awesome. So just drop those in the comments below. But otherwise, I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys have a good day. Thanks, guys.